Presently, a sense of mutual caution is quite common, especially among Chinese nationals returning home and international students coming back to China. They're sounding the alarm about the increased strictness of customs checks. To what extent, you might wonder? Well, in recent times, Chinese returnees and international students experienced initial excitement upon arriving back in their homeland. They stood by the baggage carousel, expecting a smooth and trouble-free retrieval of their belongings, but their anticipation turned into surprise as they noticed a new addition to the once familiar and uneventful luggage carousels: a prominent yellow seal securely attached to their bags. What's noteworthy is that this phenomenon wasn't isolated. It affected many travelers. The substantial seal, accompanied by a conspicuous lock, conveyed a clear message: their luggage had come under the purview of customs supervision. A link directive required an immediate visit to the Customs Declaration Office. A stern warning reinforced the message that any unauthorized interference with the customs seal would lead to severe consequences. Faced with this unexpected situation, some adventurous individuals contemplated quietly evading the customs measures. However, their attempts were met with an unforeseen security feature. Venturing beyond a certain point triggered a loud alarm, creating a situation that was not only disconcerting but also attention-grabbing. As a result, travelers found themselves on a one-way journey to the Customs Declaration Office. There, customs officials, upon seeing the sealed luggage and the conspicuous yellow mark, would commence luggage inspections, suspecting the presence of forbidden items. For example, items like meat products, books, and magazines, among others, are subject to inspection. In certain aspects, it may not be advanced, but its regulatory oversight is exceptionally advanced. They've introduced a technique that is now ahead of many other countries, known as pre-checks. These inspections take place before your luggage even hits the baggage carousel. Typically, customs inspections occur after your luggage arrives at the carousel. But with this new approach, inspections happen before your luggage makes it there. This could mean an in-flight inspection or an inspection after landing. It's described as comprehensive, transparent, and automated. The Chinese government's oversight system is so advanced that it can detect any prohibited items almost instantly. Upon landing, about half of the flights have these security seals or locks affixed to the luggage. After opening your luggage, they examine various items, such as meat products, electronics, or other goods. In fact, netizens have compiled a list of items that are frequently inspected, and there are at least 8 major categories. One category is explosives and firearms, which raises the question of why anyone would carry such items. Another category involves drugs, though instances of these are relatively rare. Then there are meat products, with restrictions on bringing foreign meat products into the country. This restriction is understandable. Additionally, there's a range of materials, including books, magazines, audiovisual materials, and anything politically related. All of these are subject to extended scrutiny. Currently, as a Chinese resident, if you're bringing personal items into the country, you must declare anything exceeding 5,000 yuan in value. Failure to do so can lead to charges of smuggling for non-Chinese residents. The value of items you can bring without declaring them cannot exceed 2,000 Chinese yuan. If your items surpass this limit, you must declare them. Failing to do so may result in unclear consequences, potentially involving smuggling charges. Additionally, Chinese people have a penchant for bringing duty-free gifts valued at 8,000 yuan or less. If the value of these gifts exceeds this limit, you should declare them, or you may face penalties or fines. Failure to declare these items may also lead to smuggling charges, which can have serious legal consequences, including arrest. Now, with stringent inspections, the process of securing luggage with locks and seals is already intimidating. Travelers recount their experiences at various airports, including Beijing's Daxing International Airport, which was recently flooded, turning into an artificial lake. There's also Tianjin International Airport and Chengdu's Tianfu Airport, all of which are international airports. Shanghai Pudong Airport. Recently, a frightening incident unfolded. More than 100 passengers from a relatively large Boeing flight were detained, accounting for approximately 1/3 of the passengers on that flight. Such extensive inspections are time-consuming and can stretch from the morning into the evening. Opening and examining each piece of luggage individually is a time-consuming process. Typically, at domestic airports, travelers can expect to spend around half an hour to get through the checks. For international airports, the experience can be even more time-consuming. The situation regarding U.S. visas, especially for Chinese students and scholars, has become remarkably complex in recent years. It's not just challenging, it's an uphill battle. In fact, some might argue it's one of the toughest phases for aspiring travelers. Almost any kind of visa application for the United States is met with high rejection rates, upwards of 99%. Chinese citizens aiming to visit the U.S. for tourism, education, or even family visits find themselves running into an impenetrable wall of denials. This stringent visa process applies to students, scholars, and even people planning to visit their family. If you're a mature woman, it gets even more complicated, as the U.S. authorities are wary of people potentially settling in the U.S. either due to immigration intentions or job prospects. Staying long-term in the U.S., whether for education or personal reasons, could entail seeking a partner or accommodating your parents' visit, which introduces more complexities. Around a decade ago, the situation was completely different. Humanitarian and human rights considerations played a significant role, even for visiting scholars and students in the U.S. They were allowed to have their family members visit them without much hassle. Now, this has changed significantly. The mere presence of family members coming to visit raises suspicions on the U.S. side. Consequently, securing a U.S. visa has become a highly challenging endeavor, and without a doubt, one of the most daunting ones. This challenge extends to Chinese students who have already studied in the U.S. attempting to return. They might find it increasingly hard to secure a visa if they want to continue their education. The problem has escalated to the point that some students, after completing their studies in the U.S., are sent back. For example, if they've studied at one of the 18 Chinese universities that were placed on the U.S. blacklist, but they claim otherwise or even provide falsified credentials, it can result in deportation or even legal consequences. Students who've been within the U.S. for an extended period might face further complications if they've applied to various universities and withheld information about their prior educational experiences. It may not just be considered a visa fraud, but also academic fraud, potentially leading to arrest. Those caught in this web of deceit can face a jail term of up to 10 years, depending on the severity of their fraudulent actions. These international students need to exercise extreme caution and avoid bringing any deceptive practices from China, like plagiarism, academic fraud, or diploma forgery, to the United States. However, there's a possibility that the Chinese authorities might be cooperating behind the scenes. Wang Wenbin, the spokesperson for the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, responded to a reporter's question about the deportation of 3 students due to visa issues by attempting to shift blame onto the U.S. government. He suggested that the U.S. government may have obtained these students' data, insinuating some form of data theft. It's possible that the Chinese government is orchestrating a scenario in which certain service students alter their educational and professional histories to deceive the U.S. authorities and secure visas. However, upon arrival in the U.S., these students are promptly deported, leading to China's frustration, as it believes its design has failed. As a result, Wang Wenbin refrains from criticizing these students involved in visa fraud and instead accuses the U.S. government of obstructing academic and educational exchanges. This, however, only serves to expose the unscrupulous role the Chinese authorities play behind the scenes. Turning our attention to Japan, it's often considered one of the most desirable destinations for Chinese nationals. The proximity, shared use of Chinese characters, and high living standards make Japan an attractive choice. However, just as Japan had begun to open its doors to Chinese group tourism, there emerged a wave of anti-Japanese sentiment instigated in part by CCP. The CCP concocted unfounded fears regarding Japan's disposal of nuclear wastewater into the sea, misleading the public with baseless claims about radiation risks, cancer, and birth defects. This disinformation campaign has triggered anti-Japanese sentiments and put a dent in Sino-Japanese relations. Matters between China and Japan have taken a concerning turn, with implications for student exchanges, tourism, and even the possibility of a diplomatic rupture. The situation has escalated to a point where Japan's enterprises might consider pulling out of China entirely, and Japanese nationals might contemplate leaving as well. Chinese citizens, too, may reconsider their stay in Japan. Given the proximity and the cultural exchanges that have existed between the two nations, it's a great loss for both countries to reach such a state of tension. The authorities in the West bear some responsibility for this, as their policies have contributed to this situation. Moreover, the trend of Chinese migration to various countries is on the rise. As more and more Chinese people aspire to migrate, the eligibility criteria are becoming increasingly stringent. Elite and affluent Chinese individuals often seek investment-based immigration opportunities. However, many countries, including several in Europe, have halted or raised the entry bar for investment-based immigration programs. For instance, Canada once had several such programs but has since suspended them. Australia has followed suit, as have some European countries including Denmark, Portugal, and Spain. Greece, too, has made it more challenging for Chinese citizens to pursue investment-based immigration. This stringent trend is not exclusive to the Western countries. Even some Asian nations like South Korea have raised the barriers for Chinese students, investors, and migrants, tightening their scrutiny to prevent potential risks or over-reliance on Chinese nationals. Singapore, which is primarily made up of a 75% ethnic Chinese population, has taken a surprising stance. The investment required for immigration has increased significantly, reaching a startling 1 billion Singapore dollars, which is equivalent to more than $500 million in Chinese yuan. This financial requirement has been raised to prevent the overinflux of Chinese immigrants into Singapore, a measure that has caught many by surprise due to the unfamiliarity of the Singaporean currency. The United States suspects that these Chinese universities primarily focus on engineering, and some are even closely tied to military projects. These students might study engineering or military-related subjects in China and then pursue further studies in the U.S. in fields like computer science or artificial intelligence. There's a concern that they may gain access to sensitive technologies or even engage in espionage activities on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party. This, in turn, could pose a security threat to the United States, as the CCP produces advanced military equipment that threatens both American and Chinese security. These products, which are subject to stringent regulations, can be difficult to identify when Chinese citizens return to their homeland. Some people might express amazement at China's advanced surveillance and control systems, which are unparalleled around the world. This level of control is so extensive that individuals virtually lose their freedom upon arriving in China. Chinese customs can identify citizens even before they collect their luggage, and this level of control is reflected in the hours-long wait times at Chinese airports, leaving people feeling restricted. Given these circumstances, it's becoming increasingly challenging for young people who aspire to study abroad. Many Chinese people feel conflicted about whether to leave the country or return to it. In response, the Chinese government has provided guidance by jointly issuing a statement through 9 ministries, including the Ministry of Education, the National Development and Reform Commission, and the Ministry of Veterans Affairs. This statement encourages people to settle in their hometowns with the aim of boosting rural development. This initiative is known as returning to settle in one's hometown. The call is clear. Leverage hometown nostalgia and tap into sentimental attachments to one's roots. The message is that settling in your hometown is the way forward. It's no longer about seeking opportunities abroad or in major cities, especially when job prospects are limited. Your path now leads you back to your hometown. The initiative encourages a diverse group of individuals to return to their hometowns, spanning from university graduates to retirees and even migrant workers. This movement to return to one's roots is in full swing. The appeal has called upon the sacrifices made by 1 or 2 generations of youth. This phenomenon occurred in the aftermath of the Mao Zedong era, especially following Mao's passing. Those who had sacrificed their youth during this period have now reached an age where they are returning to urban areas, bearing the weight of weariness and physical toll. Young women return, carrying the burdens of physical and emotional hardships they endured. On the other hand, young men, no longer in their prime, are making their way back to the cities. They aim to seize the last opportunity, coinciding with the early stages of China's economic reform and opening up policies. While these policies marked the beginning of significant changes for China, for this group of individuals, it represents their last chance. It's akin to catching the final train in their life's journey. This scenario is viewed as a form of favor extended by the Communist Party, ensuring that nobody is left without prospects. Regarding where these individuals might go, the Chinese Communist Party recently published an article in the Seeking Truth magazine. This article featured a speech by Xi Jinping from 2 years ago, delivered during the extreme lockdowns and zero-COVID approach implemented during the COVID-19 pandemic. At that time, various countries globally were grappling with lockdowns, remote work arrangements, and economic downturns, leading democratic nations to provide financial support to their citizens. This support typically involved direct cash payments and subsidies to businesses to help navigate economic hardships. However, Xi Jinping firmly rejected adopting such an approach in China, emphasizing that they would not embrace Western-style welfarism, which he believed promoted idleness. This stance contradicted the historical principles of the Communist Party, which, rooted in Marx's ideology, have traditionally endorsed wealth redistribution and social welfare as essential tenets of socialist societies. This abrupt departure from socialist principles perplexed the Chinese populace, leading to discussions about whether China's refusal to provide financial aid to its citizens aligned with the party's historical commitment to social welfare. Some argue that the Chinese government has shown a propensity to offer financial assistance to other nations while not extending the same to its own citizens. For instance, African students receive substantial annual scholarships, sometimes amounting to as much as tens of thousands of dollars, while China provides billions in aid to African nations. This includes substantial contributions to the South-South Cooperation Fund, an initiative spearheaded by Xi Jinping, as well as the ambitious Global Development Initiative. Xi has emphasized the importance of ensuring that no country falls behind in the modernization process, positioning China as a global leader responsible for guiding the world, often through significant financial commitments. However, some critics question whether this foreign investment and aid might be seen as fostering dependence in other nations, which runs contrary to China's claims that it wants to avoid nurturing idleness. A case in point is China's commitment to providing financial support to Myanmar in the aftermath of the military coup, including substantial grants to Burmese students. This commitment was aimed at ensuring that Burmese students could continue their education without interruption. This stance, too, raises questions about whether it could be perceived as enabling dependency. Critics argue that, at its core, the Chinese government is apprehensive about nurturing idleness among its own citizens, suggesting that Chinese citizens should be proactive and self-reliant. They point to the experiences of Xi Jinping, who spent time in rural areas during his youth due to Mao Zedong's directives, and suggest that others should also be willing to embrace hardship as a path to personal growth. In essence, there is a disconnect between the opportunities Xi Jinping and his contemporaries had in their youth and the realities faced by today's youth in China. The assumption that all young people can follow the same path and ascend to the highest offices in the country doesn't hold true. China is far from a democratic society with open elections, and not everyone can become the leader. Xi's narrative implies that individuals should willingly endure hardships akin to his own experiences, but in practice, few will ever reach the top leadership positions.